Hi there. Thank you for joining me again today for the next interview in the series for dog owners to for dog owners to discover the secrets of dog experts that will transform your life and create the best friend you've always wanted. Today, I am very honored to have Matt Beisner here today. He is a fantastic, amazing dog expert and trainer, and he is very experienced with aggressive dogs. And I know Matt from the TV show Dog Impossible. It's on National Geographic Wild and
Mhm.
also on Disney. And I am just so honored that you are here today. Thank you very much, Matt.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's a privilege to be a part of this. Thank you.
I'm so, you have a lot of knowledge to give us. You've worked with some very difficult dogs, and I personally have learned um, methods and a way of thinking about interacting with dogs from you. And I'm so glad that you came here today to talk with me. Um, it's up to you. I've heard that you understand that you used to have a fear of dogs. And I just think that's
Yeah,
a very fascinating story, and to see you be such great friends to dogs now.
yeah, it's remarkable. In hindsight, it all seems like a straight line. I have learned that what I'm afraid of usually is the area where I can best be of service. And I also will say too that if I stay open and I'm willing to help others, that nothing I've ever done will be wasted. you know, Good choices, terrible choices, none of it gets wasted if I actually am willing to use it to help others and remain teachable. So yeah, I was afraid of dogs. I got bit when I was a kid, really common. It was Halloween, so that's common for a lot of people. But more specific is that the German Shepherd was wagging its tail, and I was probably 8 years old, and the three adults that were there said the dog's wagging its tail. It's fine. And so I reached for a Halloween candy, and the Shepherd lunged and punctured me in the arm, and that was a surprise to all of the adults. Of course, it was terrifying to me. And then I spent the next like 3 decades terrified of dogs,
Wow.
and ashamed of that. Like that was a growing thing. And in my world, as a young man and as a man, you don't say you're afraid of dogs, but that's how it was. And it was really something to come up against that. And then of course to find myself on the other side of the work I do now.
No kidding. That's scary. Well, actually, honestly, I don't know too many people who have been bit by dogs
Mm.
on like that's not it's a horrible thing to go through, and that's why it's so important to be safe and prevent these kind of things from happening, because it can just damage a child for so long. 30, that's a long time
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
afraid of
I
dogs.
got to a point where I was crossing the street. I'd see a dog and I'd just cross the street, and I didn't know what to do. And in hindsight, certainly, and in my own work and in going all the way back to that experience, it just wasn't a good setup for that dog. People didn't know what they didn't know. And there's so much nuance to how the tail wags, for example. And there's no way that you'd be able to read that in the dark at night. And in hindsight, that German Shepherd the behavior was totally appropriate. You know, we were in an inappropriate setup for that dog to succeed.
Uh-oh.
You
Uh-oh.
can do whatever you need to do.
Oh, they're going out the back. Yes, I was just, since you were saying that though, I hope I can get this in here before there's something obvious outside. Um, we went to a school, we were doing this educational program, and we went to this school, and they were very excited, and the teachers were very excited to see us. And it was an educational program for dogs with the kids, and they took us walking around, and all the kids had colored a picture that said a wagging tail is a happy dog. And it was, to me, to this day, I still can't imagine how crushed some of those kids felt when we had to go in there and say, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just lack of knowledge,
Yeah.
absolute lack of knowledge and education, and
Yeah.
not knowing, so can I ask you then how you ended up getting into dogs? Like how
Yeah,
they came?
I want to say that that's an excellent example of where we're at, maybe globally, that it's not for lack of love. Thankfully, it's not for lack of joy around a dog. It's just for lack of understanding. So that's a great place to start. If I'm looking at how I can help educate people, you love a dog, you care about what happens, you want to know more, that's a really, really good place to start. So at least they got that going for them. Excuse me. I got started, it was early on. I've been open about, being in recovery in terms of drug addiction and alcoholism. And I moved in with somebody, and she had I don't know, I was just a few months into my detox, and she had a little terrier who's really one of the stars of Dog Impossible. I literally pick up their poop and get their water. That's really how that relationship works. It should. And I moved in with her, and she was working, and I was homebound, and this little recently adopted terrier that she had would attack me. I'd get up and move, and he would lunge, and I'd put my food down and fight me for my lunch. And it was just, I don't recommend anybody detoxing under those circumstances, by the way. But what I realized in hindsight is that he needed to get out of the house, and I needed to help him get out of the house. And he needed to begin to explore the world. And I would sit on the stoop with him, and neither of us were really good or comfortable engaging with the world. But that was the beginning of a cornerstone of my work. And that is, if I help provide the dog with what it needs, I'm going to change for the better.
Isn't that awesome? But you figured it out.
What that looks like, I'm still figuring that out, especially what the dogs need. But it was really great to look back years later and realize, this is literally how the whole thing started, and then I have to have a structure in my work that serves the spirit of that.
Yeah. See, it was your instinct that something just came out, and you realized, and you were able to do it. You truly do have an ability to read and understand dogs, as I have, already said. I've watched your show and I see it, and that's my Herbie.
Hi, friend.
I would love you to, and I know we were talking about this in growing observation and talking about watching and learning. And even the first thing I'd like to try and teach about is body language.
Yeah.
And it's all in that there. If you can kind of start and explain how you tell people, how do you explain it to people?
Yeah. It's a really important question. And I am fascinated, borderline obsessed with patterns and movements and, what's predictable and those kinds of things. And I think out of necessity, because I came in, really enthusiastic, a lot of heavy-handed stuff, and not a lot of experience and not a lot of education, and prone to being heavy-handed. That's a pretty dangerous combination for the dogs, for myself, for the people involved. So out of necessity, I had to learn very quickly, if I do this and the dog does that, I'm likely to get bit. I will say I was probably a much slower learner than I wish I had been, but I started to learn just out of self-preservation. Wasn't yet thinking about the dog. And along the way, what I started to recognize, particularly in the big leap from season 1, which was, I think, 3 years ago, we filmed that, to where we're at now, is I may have excellent defensive leash handling skills, or I may have excellent skills of observation, but if they are only for the primary, or if their primary purpose is so I don't get hurt, so I can change the dog's behavior, then I'm really missing something critical, which is the opportunity for the dog to not have to feel like it has to behave that way in the first place. So kind of what we were talking about a little bit with blue line cases, in your former work, if I set dogs up well and meet them where they're at and work based on what they're telling me, which requires a lot of observation, then I don't have to have excellent defensive leash handling skills. It really helps to have them, but that's not where I start. That's where I arrive when this has gone south unexpectedly. So the observation is key. And I was thinking about this, we talked a little bit about this, when I'm thinking about what I can contribute, beyond my love for and my voracious appetite for what's so amazing about our profession and the experts and the information that's out there. science and the education of all of it, what do I have to contribute? Well, I've got great skills of observation, and I understand that we're in a results-oriented business. So when somebody hires me, they are hiring me because they have a behavior or behaviors that are challenging for them. They might judge them as bad or unacceptable or dangerous. So nobody's calling me because they want to sit and watch their dogs. They're calling me because they need to see some change happen. But what I have learned for myself, that fortunately I'm able to present in a way where the humans involved can feel included and empowered and activated, is if we stop and watch your dog, we're going to learn something about how your dog learns. And if we learn something about how your dog learns, what it responds to, what positive reinforcers does it respond to, what kind of interests does it have, where does it want to engage with the world at what point in the day, if we start to learn that stuff and observe what the body language tells us that supports that. For example, if you tell me my dog loves being at the dog park, and I say, well, what does that look like? And you say, oh, he prances around and then he bows and he does X, Y, Z. We've got a pretty safe body language vocabulary to refer to. Okay, so if we don't see that behavior when X dog comes in, that might be an indication that there's some stress or uncertainty, you know, and so we start to create context for how to better support the dog. If we jump into something virtually and we're in the home and we're having an initial conversation, which, by the way, I love to start with, tell me what you love about your dog. I can't recommend that enough for people, anybody that's watching this, pet professional or otherwise. Starting a conversation with what you love about your dog usually gets a lot of oxytocin going. It loosens things up, and it lets people off of the shame hook that they often come into a session with, which is, here, let me tell you all the things that are terrible about my dog or my dog's behavior, everything I've done wrong, the training I failed to do. I can relate to all of that, and I'm here to support you and not to help push you further down that spiral. So, and that includes if you've used methods. I get a lot of people who will shyly say to me, you know, I used an e-collar. I haven't used e-collars in years, but I used a lot of heavy-handed tools and in a way that wasn't best for the dog. So I don't have judgment or shame about that. And you are certainly entitled to your feelings, but we don't need to hang out there, because let's talk about what you love about your dog and how we can help support your dog. There's a lot of healing that comes just in the willingness to stay open and repair. So I sit down, we start virtually, I sit down and we start talking through things, and they tell me things about what the dog likes, doesn't like, some of the behaviors, excuse me. And then I say, let's observe, let's put the camera on the dog and let's observe a scenario that you describe as blank. And let's see what the body tells us. And a lot of people have seen enough, you know, dog training in social media or videos or films or television that they can have a general idea. But back to being bit on Halloween, a tail wagging does not a happy dog make. So what the tail wagging looks like, and this is the context in which the behavior is showing up, is really important as a place to start. What happens with the ears, with the forehead, with the eyes, with the nose, with the mouth, the tightening of the lips? How does the breathing change, the body positioning? And I strongly recommend to people, even if your dog's not doing anything that's a concern for you, film the dog and watch it back and just start to see what you see. And if you're like me, film it, put it in slow motion, put music on it. It gets really, it's really cool, real fast.
It can be fun.
You know, and then when you see behavior that you're concerned about, not to bait it or instigate the behavior, but when you see behavior that you're concerned about, as long as this is not an unsafe behavior, catch a quick clip of that on video and play that back, and you will start to create like a behavioral vocabulary context. Oh, when the ears were like this, soft and floppy, it seems like there was a looser jowl, and it seems like the eyes were softer and there was more bounce and more fluidity in the body. But when the ears were tight or pinned back, you'll start to see likely some accompanying behaviors. Each dog is individual, but there are typically patterns. So the long answer to this really important question that you asked is, once And I come in not knowing, I obviously don't have all the answers. I probably don't even have a lot of answers, but what I know how to do is watch. I know the questions to ask that will get me to the better questions to ask. So if we start to watch together, we're going to do this together, and we start to share what we're observing, then we get to see the dogs a little bit more for who they are. And I don't know anybody that doesn't think that that's cool. I don't know anybody who loves their dog that's reaching out for help that doesn't think, oh, wow, and start to feel hopeful and curious and empowered. And so from a professional standpoint, we might call that the buy-in or the onboarding. Okay, let me get you on board with this thing. But just from a human to human standpoint, we're there and we're trying to figure this out together so that we can help this dog. That's a really special moment where we start to see something. I may see it sooner because of my experience, but we start to see it. And then all of a sudden the observation has value and merit, and we can now rely on it as a tool, maybe our starting tool with which to explore the other behaviors. And then the obstacles that you might have hired me to help you overcome, the obstacles are easier to look at because overcoming them really is predicated on how we are observing what's happening with our dog. And then it typically, we have a way to work.
Sorry.
We have a way to work. And I see I have an agreement in there. I just got an amen from one of your dogs.
Oh, he is just, it's just amazing when you do. I mean, I've talked to a few people and about like that kind of aha moment when, you actually realizing and what you thought was one, it's an interpretation, right? But it's more than that because you're actually really looking and observing. I mean, just this fact of observing, you can learn so much. And then when it makes sense, when something makes sense, and then you can even, and start to take things to the next step and you're actually connecting, it's just the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
It feels like a miracle sometimes. It's so exciting and wonderful. And it starts with observing.
Yeah, it does. And it was something I've been doing for years. And of course, the way I observe is informed by what I know and what I don't know. So I've mislabeled stuff. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff along the way. I was practicing the skills, but they weren't being honed through the deeper understandings that I have now and that I'm going to continue to have. Yeah, I love it. And so, again, somebody hires me for results, and what they actually get is possibility and hope. And then it opens up in a very different way.
And they get it authentically, you can tell, which
Yes.
makes a big difference.
Right.
We care so much. My little lick, I got a licker here. He just wants to lick. But it's just amazing what I can throw in a couple of very quick examples of videoing that made a big difference for my life. Was my Hogan, the one that's barking. He's I've talked about him lots, but was taken to the vet to be euthanized for aggression, and he's a POM though. Mine are all, I think I mentioned, they're all small. But I did a video, one of my videos of my training when I was doing things with him. I found out he was terrified of clapping. And when I get excited, right, and I'm, good dogs and stuff, definitely don't want to do that right now. I found out he was scared, so I worked on it. Now he comes running. But just knowing that, and being able to help him through it. And another one was at a rally competition when I turned, my dog went off sniffing, and they're supposed to come with you. And I thought I'd lost him. I thought, oh, he's not even with me. He's not even doing this. And sure enough, watching the video, it was very clear. He thought I threw something as I turned my hand.
Wow.
So just, it's just, I can't say it enough, how much videoing, and you can learn such tiny things. And as the person doing, interacting with the dog, you're more thinking about you and not paying attention to you don't catch everything. Right?
Yeah. And I think too, it's that I get a place to start from,
Mhm.
You know, and sometimes intuitively, you know, whatever the combination of ways that something's speaking to me works, um, I get a sense of a place to start from. And I'm, you know, if that's not the right place, then we can pivot, which is why your skill and education and understanding of the science is so important, because we have something else that we can go to, continuing to learn from people. I heard something recently on one of the Beyond the Opera postings from Kim Brophy and Kathy Murphy and Andrew Hale, the BTO posse, as I like to call them. And I think it was Kathy Murphy talking about two chickens from the same brood that were presented with the same set of stressors. And chicken A exhibited a lot of overt stress behavior, and chicken B exhibited little to none of the stress behavior. But internally, what was measured is that chicken A, which had the overt stress behavior, had relatively low internal impact. Chicken B, which we would have judged from a behavioral standpoint was fine because that chicken didn't react, actually had a lot of internal impact. So when I heard that, on top of everything I just said to you, I heard that and I was like, oh man, even knowing how I might approach things, I might be looking at a dog that is fine based on what little observation I've done, however well intentioned, and that dog's actually stressed or suffering. So bottom line is I just got to I got to stay considerate because I just don't know, and keep
Yeah.
trying to find a way to meet the dog where it's at.
They don't, they don't, yeah, it's not always clear. Okay, come on, buddy. Oh, I know if I put you down, you're going to come right back. Apparently he wants attention. He's just sitting right back on me.
That's all good.
Put in here. It's really, just, yeah, working where the dog is, and they didn't come with manuals. So
No,
we're always
and
trying to
honestly, like
figure
neither
out.
do we either, you know.
Yeah.
We didn't really, I mean, there may be training manuals, but training is different than teaching, and observation is different than what my agenda is. Watching because I want to work towards an end goal is very different than watching because I want to see what this dog is going to show me, you know. So that the end goal is, how can I help this dog help itself? Fascinating.
Well, and I think as we kind of discussed, it's more of a just being with the dog,
Mhm.
and not demanding, come sit down,
Right.
all these things that in reality take away all the dog's choices, like at any second. It's kind of changed me how I feel about the word training, but I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like it's wrong to do stuff and to keep it to do with your dog, but it's different. We're talking different, like just living in your house together.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much observation to be had. When I was running the facility, which is, I don't know, if we're going to reopen in LA, but I kept saying to my staff, you spend as much time in the yards watching dogs. Just get out in the yards watching dogs. And I think that, maybe it was poor modeling on my part, but there was a lot of put dogs out and go do the next thing, and go do the next thing and go do the next thing. And
Well,
man, like I just love watching dogs. I love watching dogs. It's so informative, and I love doing that with people and seeing it together. My partner Steph Diorio from the show, she's so dynamite to work with, and she and I will just geek out. We'll be in a yard. Did you see that? Oh yeah, that was amazing. Or she'll say, "Oh, I got chills," and I say, "Yeah, my spidey sense picked up." And like that kind of stuff is just so. It's so cool. I feel like I'm sneak peeking in on nature. Trying not to mess with it and just be a privileged observer.
and they tell you so much.
Oh
I
man.
still think the best thing that I have totally just watched and just watched dogs. I just love it, and especially when they're having fun. It's really quite a unique way of playing that they all have. They're all different. But when there's like a stinker puppy, and the biggest dog can be the best and the most gentlest, but the clearest
Yeah.
at straightening that puppy out and putting him in his place. And I've seen it a few times, and I know you've seen it. You've got plenty of dogs that are great with
Yeah.
working with other dogs, and it's just totally their language, and
Yeah.
there's often not even any noise.
Yeah. Yeah, often not. Yeah, which is really useful if I'm looking at aggression cases. Typically, by the time we get to that level of behavior, there have been a lot of cues that we might not notice. And sometimes we might not notice it because the aggression is so scary or intense, whatever the degree is. But it's so disarming that we're not even in a place to have clocked the nuanced behavior that led up to that. So um, again, like trying to create context and walking people back through it. And okay, what happened before and what happened before that? And then we're 30 minutes into a conversation and somebody says, I just had a house guest a couple of days ago and my dog just seemed nervous the whole time. Oh, okay. So, we can start to make some relative, at least considerations, if not assumptions about impact. Just it rarely comes out of the blue.
Because
And
we don't even realize what affects them.
yeah, that's right.
I'm trying to think of, yeah, we were talking about that. I was talking about that with one of the speakers about separation anxiety, and you're putting the camera on and you're finding out, that what you thought was triggering your dog doesn't even notice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Amazing.
videoing it can really, like you said, give so many answers.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of it, and you can just, start to understand your dog from a different angle.
Yeah. And thinking about observation too, if I'm thinking about the obstacles, a lot of them we already been talking about there. They're typically behavioral. My dog does this, and this is a problem. Just generally speaking, that's what it is. Um, but when we start to observe, I think that the obstacle becomes more apparent in that it's what I have not seen or not been able to allow or support the dog with that is the obstacle. The behavior is the result of what somehow I didn't do. And that is a particularly empowering place, for the dog, because then it doesn't put it on the dog. You got to check out Sarah Fisher, her school, Animal Centered Education in the UK. She is just like, she's doing next level stuff in terms of observation. When you were talking about the dog going to the right because it thought there was a treat there, she's got observational skills that leave me speechless. I just am so geeked out on what she's doing. So if we start to see, and she says the dog is always right. So if the dog is always right, okay, then that puts the onus on me, but it also puts the empowerment into me, because then I don't have to fix the dog and I don't have to put anything on the dog. I got to see how I can change so that I can better understand why this right behavior is happening. Why did that German Shepherd bite me on Halloween? Well, it was a terrible setup for that German Shepherd. So based on that setup, what that dog did was totally appropriate. Desired? No. Do we want it repeated? No. Dangerous? Absolutely. But then I don't put it on the dog.
No, that's, what, and it's true, because dogs are just they're dogs. They're reacting how they all of their instinct and their in the past, that's what they do. And that's just like you or I react how we do to things from our past and our lives and being human and whatever, we want to say. It's the same with dogs. They're doing the best they can. And self-preservation is always in there, a priority for them, right?
That's right. Safety and relief. That's what Andrew Hale talks about, safety and relief. And we're looking at how to align that, work towards best possible outcome. And Kim Brophy's work, her legs work, is really clear. The learning and the education and the genetics and the self of that dog, and they're bringing all of it to it. There's another thing that is, I don't want to assume that it's implied, but I have to practice accurate self-appraisal. If I'm looking at who is this observer and how does he observe, in the same way I'm looking at who is this dog and how does it learn and observe. I have to ask for help, rely on colleagues, stay educated, and I have to do personal things that set me up, so I don't go into sessions hungry, busy in my mind. That happens. It's the nature of running businesses. It's the nature of helping people and dogs, especially post-COVID. A lot of people and their dogs are in a really tough spot. But I have to have good practices so that I can better be of service. So my observation actually starts with me. My meditation in the morning, That's going to tell me something about where I'm at. Oh, I'm hungry and I'm about to go into a session. Okay, so I better pay attention to that, so that I'm not expecting and working towards results just because I want to get out of there so I can go eat. You know what I mean? Like pretty animal stuff in that way. And the observation of myself, the observation of the dog, and then the observation of the relationships too. Me and the dog, the humans and the dog, and me and the humans. All of that is always at play. But ultimately, it begins and ends with my ability to humbly and accurately reflect on how I carry myself in the work, you know.
Mindset is, to me, it's makes such a huge difference, because I mean, us as people working with the dogs and trying to help the whole thing, we're not, the whole situation, the family or in owners and stuff, we're not the ones that have the urgency to make sure, we're going to keep this dog, is going to bite someone again, or the guilt or the frustration, like any challenge that we have with that. In reality, I think that dog owners would have even more.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's such a great point too, because we're walking into, especially virtually, we're virtually stepping into a world where we are not possibly going to know the stress or the impact of the stress on that entire family unit, humans and dogs. We're just not going to know that. And so, I mean, from your past, with the kind of work you did, you start to siphon through that stuff because we have a job to do. Make sure this individual, this patient, or this dog is okay. Stabilize and work towards recovery. And so we come in with the ability to process and kind of compartmentalize and do stuff that will allow us to help those. I see a lot of people suffering in general, and I see a lot of people suffering during COVID, and now that we're coming out of a lot of places that are coming out of lockdown. And there's been a lot of pain and a lot of stress, and we don't really know the impact of that. We're getting that information. But if we were to conduct an experiment and say, okay, first of all, let's send you the message every day that you're going to die. You might die. Second of all, let's put you in isolation, relative isolation. And thirdly, let's take away, and your dogs don't have a break from you. And then fourth, we take away your stress relievers and their stress relievers. And let's do it for 1.5 years and see what happens. That sounds really hard for everybody involved, which is, I think, is what we're seeing, and that includes the pet professionals that are showing up. There's no way in the work that you were doing, Jodie, that you didn't show up days where I shouldn't make any assumption. That's
okay.
General like that. But I tell me if it's true for you that there were days where you show up and it's not an easy day for you, but you still show up.
Oh yeah. You have to. That, to me, I'm kind of, on a mission, and it's very hard some days. And I've had help.
Yep.
I think everybody needs help. This is a horrible time to be alone. And to not be getting support. And this has been a wonderful method, just Zoom alone. I think that Zoom has helped keep me sane personally.
Agreed. Yeah.
Just connecting with amazing people and yes, and learning more about dogs. This has been an amazing way.
Yeah.
To do that, but it's not easy for people. I realize that, and thinking about their dog when they've got all this other stuff going on. It's could be quite low on the priority list, but yet still there's a lot of guilt and other feelings behind it.
Yeah, agreed. And a lot of people don't, they may not know, they may not verbalize, or they may not know how they've been impacted. I worked with this couple recently. They're clearly, they're so committed. And we met for a virtual follow-up, and they, and one person in the couple said, we just haven't done much, and things are getting worse. And then I listened to her partner, and he had a different perspective. And then I asked them what's been going on for them personally. okay, they were giving me signs of that, and there'd been an illness in the family, and they'd moved, and there was a change in job schedule, and like you're talking about 3 of the 5 or 6 top human stressors right out of the gate. And I'm so grateful for the kind of modeling that's been given to me by people like Mike Shikasho and Kim Brophy and Emily Strong and Trish McMillan and Dee Holt and Dr. Amy Cook. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And so Dr. Chris Pockle and Andrew Hale, I sat there and I had a moment. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to talk anything about training. I want to talk about what's going on for these people. And they got to talk at length. And then I said, you know what? Based on the data, the feedback that you're giving me in regards to your dog's progress, you are definitively making progress. But you know what else? You're under a ton of stress, and I don't want you to do anything else. I actually think you just take a step back and keep doing stuff that's working, and let's not add anything new. And I saw this, I saw the shift for them. And not coincidentally, they saw a big leap in their dog's progress, but they didn't know how much stress they were under. And I want to say this carefully, because there's nothing like, I want to say that they didn't know that they needed permission, or that they had permission to just be. Exactly. Thank you, Jodie. To just be. And that was one of those moments that had nothing to do with dog training. And it was absolutely at the center of how we try to help dogs, to help the people that are going to help the dogs. And I was just so grateful to all those people I mentioned and other people. I was like, this is one of those things. The Lima Beings, that's something else to check out. The limabeings.com. It's a master
Lima Beings?
Lima, Lima Beings, Beings. They were a private monthly group, which I was invited early on to be a part of, and then they've since gone public. And so there's just amazing modeling and opportunities to meet once a month with these experts in the field who are doing really, really like deep quality, positive work with these animals. And they're asking themselves, and we're asking each other, okay, these Lima principles, least intrusive, minimally aversive. These Lima principles that we are practiced, they're saying of themselves, and I'm newer to this over the last few years, but they're saying these Lima principles that we will practice with dogs, do we practice them with each other and with ourselves? And these are necessary and profound conversations. Oh, I can do that with a dog, but I actually didn't think about how much stress I might be under, that kind of stuff. But I don't see that if I don't practice observation, and I can't practice observation, without being open-minded. And
I really feel like my dogs have taught me a lot, right? Like we say, we learn from the dogs. They're so there's noticeable changes that I see right away, depending on the mood, depending on the stress, depending on everything. I was talking about that yesterday about, how when you're getting ready to go out or whatever. So when I used to first start doing my makeup for these interviews, they used to start, I could tell they thought I was going out. Right. And especially because a lot of times I was excited. Now they know and that's just like, kind of a low, not as complicated explanation of how sensitive they are, but your whole relationship is affected by everything, and they feel it. And yeah, people get a dog. I mean, I still think when I find once I can get people past they get a dog and we're going to try this one out type of thing. Once you make your decision, because your dog knows. Right? The dog knows how committed you are. And if you just want to sit and be with a dog, I mean, there's nothing greater. You don't have to feel like you have to do a million things, which is part of my curse. I feel like I'm not doing enough quite often. And I've had a few friends say, well, I think your dogs have a great life. Okay, they do. But I get that you need to feel like you might, need to do more or do better. But it's really not that hard to just be with them.
Yeah.
Spending the time.
It's so funny you say that. I think you're right. And I think what makes it hard is that it actually is really hard for a lot of people to just be with something. Dogs are an easy place to start because you could just sit quietly and watch a dog. And then that's pretty easy to just get entranced with. But I don't think a lot of people think they can do that, or that that's learning, or that that's valuable. You know, I used to love, we got 2 young kids, so it's hard now, but I used to love meditating with my dogs. We had a whole thing, like I'd sit on the couch and they'd all get around, and it was just.
That was what you made me think of as soon as you started saying that, because I have, it doesn't work every day, but I do try and actually kind of do yoga in the living room.
Yeah.
And of course they join in, and they're quite happy to just sit beside me, if I'm just relaxing. But it's even just sitting and watching TV. I mean, they're quite happy to just be, and is maybe we're saying people need to get better at it too, just being, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stress right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's I think that's a big part of what we can and would work towards is how do I help people have a better experience vis-a-vis dog training?
Yeah. Yes. That's what, and their dog is waiting. I always say your dog's waiting. Your dog is waiting to connect with you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
I know we're doing good here. Can I ask you one more thing to explain? I would love you to explain in your words. I can't remember exactly what your words were, although maybe I can, but I want to hear it from you. Of that, I was saying to you that episode that really made it different on explaining when you put your hand near a dog, how you can tell what a dog is saying. It's a really good beginning for understanding dogs.
Yeah, we were talking about it with the episode from season 1 with the 2 pugs, JB and Moneypenny. Again, I think kind of out of like hard-headed necessity, I started to pay better attention to how dogs, what dogs' comfort level was with me coming into their space. And along the way, thankfully, I began to cultivate it and have more understanding that can support that inherent with the dog's need for agency, which doesn't mean I let the dog out and let it run across the freeway. That's really dumb. But if I'm looking at a dog's need for agency and how its own ability to choose, below threshold with the opportunity for positive associations, its ability to choose is really going to create the most sustainable positive change. So coupled with that is consent. And I don't think it's possible to teach a dog or to encourage a dog to have agency and not practice consent with how and when we come into their space, how and when we touch them, not practice the powers, the skills of observation in regards to what their body language is telling me when I get closer. And when I put a hand out or I move a hand over the top of the head and those kinds of things. So it's something that I'm glad that it mattered to me years ago, and it's a process that continues to develop. It's one of the things that I'm proud of out of that first season, that I get probably as much feedback or more feedback from people on that than anything.
It was very clear. You did it. It was very simple and very clear.
Yeah, people are thinking differently about how they touch their dogs. And that's really neat to me, and it's really touching, and my heart warms for the dogs, because I can imagine as a dog when I'm displaying any number of cues that say not comfortable, but I'll tolerate it, and then yet again, I, the dog, have communicated, yet again, my human has either not understood or ignored. And so that at the very least lends itself to the stress of confusion. What else as a dog am I supposed to do? Well, I have an idea. Next time I'll show a lip. Oh, you corrected me for showing a lip. Okay, I won't show a lip. Now I'll growl. Oh, I got to correct you for the growl. Okay, now I'm just going to bite. So a lot of dogs are suffering because we haven't yet stopped to or learned how to engage with their personal space, and their physical body. And that to me, if I can't do that in the home, how could I possibly expect my dog to rely on me or trust me when we get out into the world full of its triggers? You know, back to your point about living together and just being with them. If the way that I am with them is willful and invasive, then my dog's not in a great setup to experience the
Yeah.
world.
And you made it very simple there, that like I still remember it, that it just putting your hand near, and if the dog, you said three things, right? So if the put it
Yeah, so I
near.
would see, yeah, I would see, even the hand can be invasive, but in some cases, what we find is we put the hand out, if the dog comes forward, that may be a yes, you know, that there's a curiosity. If the dog stays still, you know, maybe maybe the dog is watching, maybe it's an okay. If the dog turns away, that's a fair no. And even if I'm wrong about that, which is totally possible, but if that's a place that we start, then at least what we're doing is we are pausing, considering, and observing. At least we're beginning to ask the question.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you, no matter what anybody says, we don't know 100% for sure. The dogs aren't telling us in English.
Yep.
But it's a great place to just be aware of, because I really feel like a lot of dogs get a lot of pat on the head that they don't like. I don't know. I looked at him going, "Oh, that dog doesn't like that," but
Yep.
and it's just because people don't know. It's just
Yeah.
lack of awareness. It's not meant to be mean. We love our dogs. That's what we
Yeah.
do. We were taught, just like we were taught other horrible things as kids to do. What I remember doing,
I remember him too.
you
Yeah.
know, it was just because we didn't know better. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
learning because of people like you.
Yeah, well, you know, and I get to keep learning because I have conversations with people like yourself and everybody I get to work with. I learn from my clients. Clients is even kind of a clinical word, and I am challenged by and I think really fortunate to be somebody who's growing in public.
Yeah,
You know, because that's how I've landed, and you know, and I can roll with that. I have the support
you're
and
doing awesome.
mental fortitude to do it, and I'm going to keep growing because it's what I have to do and it's what's needed.
I can't wait to see the next season.
Yeah, me either. I saw rough drafts months ago, and I don't know what's coming. And it was a special season. You know, it's a COVID time capsule. I wasn't in anybody's home. We did an entire season, and I was never in a home with a dog. It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
did it do it like a lot of Zoom and cameras and stuff?
We did Zoom cameras, you know, yard work at the facility, people's backyards, you know, walks together. But it was a real challenge, and the production team and the crew, they were just excellent. We tested for COVID every week. Nobody ever got sick. I mean, there were hundreds of productions in Los Angeles that started last year, and I think only 13 film and TV shows completed, and only 7 of them were TV shows, and only 2 of them were reality show, docuseries, unscripted shows, and we were one of them.
Wow.
Yeah,
It's a crazy time.
yeah,
It's a crazy. I'm glad that you were able to still to be doing it though. I mean, I see a dog expert that is getting some amazing dog language and communication for owners, helps, that we need. It's wonderful, just it's dogs are waiting.
yeah. Dogs are waiting.
And it's a good time for dogs, moving to all this positive and respect for them
Yeah,
as emotional beings. And
yes,
science is studying and getting more exciting and learning. So
yeah. It is a good time. The dogs are rising. We're shifting from the paradigm, which is dominance top down, to we're at the beginning of a new paradigm with the help of so many of the people that I mentioned, under their leadership, and I'm on board with that. And we're at the beginning of a new paradigm, which is dog first. It's compassion first, consideration first. How do we do that? Observation.
yeah, Yeah, see, and as a nurse, it's just all sounds like glorious to me, right? Like dogs are
That's a
just.
great word for it.
All right, I better end this interview here. We're having I just love this conversation, and I thank you so much.
Thanks a lot,
I'll,
Jody.